Hey everybody, welcome back to another lesson. This is a video that was requested to me by several people actually, and that is, how can I make flourishing look good? How can I, change direction with the saber? How can I move with the saber and not be, stuck in a box? Okay. I may have covered this a little bit in some other videos of mine, but I wanted to do a detailed version so people can kind of get more of an idea of how to use the saber the way they want to use it, basically. Now, to make flourishing look good, there's actually three factors that go into it. The first of which is knowing how to use both hands, okay? If you have done any practicing with a saber, I'm guessing you probably started in your dominant hand. For most people, that's the right hand. So you'll see a lot of people, they'll start flourishing with one hand, and it looks good. There's some people out there that you can tell they've got the technique down. But after a while, you can only do so much with one hand. Okay? And after a while, it kind of starts to get boring, honestly. I'm not saying that it doesn't look good, but it only takes the interest so far. And that's where the first one comes in, knowing how to use both hands, knowing how to switch hands with the saber, okay? And this is something that the way to practice is, obviously when you first begin this kind of flourishing stuff, you want to practice in your dominant hand and kind of get a feel for the saber itself. See how the saber moves, see how the momentum works, how it wants to move, that kind of thing. Then once you get that down in your dominant hand, then you want to swap to your opposite hand and kind of get a feel for that hand as well. Okay, so you're building each hand on its own. Okay, that's the way to start practicing. Once you get good in your offhand, then you want to kind of combine and start switching hands. Okay, so you got, that opens up a whole lot more moves for you. So now you can start doing some more intricate stuff. Okay. That way you're kind of taking away only one hand and you're adding both sides of your body, which starts to make it look better, but you're still stationary. You're kind of still stuck in a box. And that's where the second factor comes in, movement, and how to move with the saber. I have done videos on this before, but again, I'm going to go into more detail here, or try to at least. Now, moving with the saber obviously involves taking a step. Now, the step comes from how the saber is moving in relation to your body, okay? So we'll take that classic shoulder roll move that everyone probably knows by now, or is trying to learn. How can you move with that, okay? Obviously, you can move backwards, you can move forwards, that kind of thing. Doesn't look that great, but you can do it. A lot of the times when you're on camera or when someone's filming you, you want to be able to move side to side, you want to be able to move in circles. So the basic one is side to side. And that comes from taking a step depending on the direction you want to go. Okay, so if I take that basic shoulder roll move, let's say I want to move that way. Okay? Typically, obviously you can advance and retreat kind of like a fencer with that move, but again, it doesn't look that good. A lot of the times the sabers come with that, that twirling motion where you're kind of spinning your body around, okay? And that's what people want to learn how to do. So if we take that move and I say I want to go that way, typically that involves taking a step with the opposite leg, okay? So if I want to move that way, I can either step around with my back leg, like that, and that would transition into another move, that upward figure eight, like that. Or I can take a step forward with my opposite leg if I'm going the other direction, okay, like that. So that's your basic movement. That's going lateral. That's going back and forth. When you start to be able to get that down, then you can start doing rotational stuff. You know, where you're taking a step back, that kind of thing. So that's the basic movement. Okay, going side to side. Obviously, after that, you can start trying to go in a circle, like I did there, where you're taking a step through. Basically, you're locking one leg to the ground, and you're just spinning around with that opposite leg. Okay. Step through, step through. So basically, my left leg is planted to the ground, and I'm just moving with my right foot. And that's when you can start to get into those transitional moves, like that. Okay. So again, that starts to look good after a while. I mean, you can start, instead of just staying stationary, you know, with the Saber, you know, this is interesting, but I'm stationary. I'm in a box. I can't move. So when you start getting that kind of stuff, then you can start adding those movements. And the best way to practice this is just take a very simple move that you pretty much have mastered. The figure 8 is a good one. And just practice transitioning those moves into other moves. So like you saw there, I took the downward figure 8 and stepping through, because I'm moving in that direction with my opposite leg, I transitioned that into the upward figure 8. Okay. And this is another thing to note here. Depending on how the Saber is spinning, you're going to find it spins the same way as you move, okay? And this is something I don't know if I've touched on before, but people have started to notice. I think Cephalus, Dark Cephalus, I really hope I'm saying that right, from Saber forums, this is something he got into a little bit. I'll try to explain it here. If you see the Saber, it's doing a rotation. From your point of view, it would be anti-clockwise, okay? So if you can see that, the Saber is always spinning downwards in this direction, okay? Keep this in mind. It's always spinning in this direction. So from my point of view, this is a downward figure 8. And from your point of view, this is a downward figure 8. If I step through with my opposite leg and transition this move, it becomes the upward figure 8, because I've changed the relationship of my body to the Saber. But if you can see, it's still going in that anti-clockwise direction. Okay, it just looks like an upward figure 8 now because I've changed my body position. If I were to transition again, it's still spinning the exact same direction, but now it's become the downward figure 8 again. Okay, and that's an important point to know. The same is true with a staff. You know, if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing a downward flower. Okay, this is your basic flower. If I do that same transition, okay, now it's an upward figure 8, but it's still spinning in that same direction. All I've done is changed my relationship to the Saber with my body. So I've gone from a downward to an upward, even though the Saber is still spinning in that direction. Excuse me. So that's an important concept to grasp. Anytime you move, the Saber's still going to be spinning in the same direction, unless you change the direction. Okay, and with that, I showed this in one of my previous videos where that aerial, that'll actually change the direction. Okay, so if you don't know how to do that move, just go back and watch my aerials video that I just did. So that move, like if we're doing the shoulder roll, okay, the Saber is spinning the majority of the time in that anti-clockwise direction, okay? So from your point of view and from my point of view, it's spinning in a downward direction because the blade is coming down, okay? If I transition into that aerial and then back, if I can do it, let's say I did it, then it's going into that upward, okay? So if I do a little bit faster, downward, downward, aerial, now I'm in the upward. I haven't moved, I haven't changed my body any, but now I'm in that upward yield, okay? That's because as I did that aerial, I changed directions. From this point, as I'm flipping it back up, it's changing the rotation of the blade, okay? So a little bit slower, downward, 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 catch, and there I reverse the direction. So now it's coming this way, it's spinning this direction now, which puts me in an upward yield, okay? So that's good if you want to change the direction of the saber. Again, that looks well and good, but I'm still stationary. So like I said, the first thing you want to know is how to use both hands, you know, how to start adding that second hand in, okay? That's the first part. The second part is knowing how to start moving with the saber, okay? Okay, so I've started moving there, and it's starting to get a little bit more interesting. Then you can start adding that directional change. Okay. Whoops. So it's starting to get a little bit more interesting there. Now the third and final thing is adding like stances, poses, you know, and starting to get into it, I guess. Starting to get the feel of how you're moving. There's really no good way to explain that. The best way I can explain it is, like if you're coming out of a move like that, there's a difference between just doing that and really showing it. Like, okay. So my blade is starting to slip out here. There's a difference between, you know, okay, I'm spinning, I'm on camera, here we go, as opposed to, you know, really getting into it, really making it look good, making it for show, basically. So the three of those combined, you start getting something more interesting, something that looks good on camera, something that looks good in front of an audience. Again, you can do the same with the staff. You know, for all you staffers out there, you know, if you come into a stance, there's a difference between coming into that kind of stance or, you know, that kind of stance where you're really driving it home what you're doing, okay? So, again, this applies to double sabers as well. I'm just using these two examples. So, that's kind of the thing to consider when you put it all together. The first and foremost is, like I said, when you're just getting into this kind of thing, practice with one hand, usually your dominant hand. Like just take that downward figure eight and just practice that. Practice the hell out of that, okay? Once you get that, practice the upward figure eight. Just work on each move in one hand, okay? When you get that, transfer to the other hand and just work on that move or those moves in that hand. You know, this could take a week, this could take a month, whatever it takes. You want to be able to get good in both hands. Then once that occurs, then you start doing those transitional moves, you know, where you're adding that other hand in with your routines. I'm not used to this long of a blade. So you're starting to transition between moves now, instead of just, you know, one hand or the other. Again, once you get that, you start trying to move with the saber. Okay. Again, when you start moving with the saber, You can kind of limit it to one hand just so you can start getting the movement down. So right here I'm not using my other hand. I'm just kind of moving with the saber, kind of getting a feel for how it moves. Just so I'm learning how to move back and forth, okay? Once you get that, then you can start adding that other hand. Okay, so that way you're kind of playing with movement while using both hands. And then the final step would be adding those, those stances, using that power stance where you got your legs far apart, and you're really making it look like you mean what you're doing, okay? That's kind of my pointers on that video, how to really sell what you're doing. Because a lot of people nowadays, when they spin, they're doing, it looks good, okay, it does, but they're stationary, there's not a lot of movement. If there is some movement, it's kind of, that kind of thing where they're one step back and forth, they're not really, they're not taking up much ground is what I'm trying to say. So that's something you really want to be conscious of, how much you're moving, how much you're switching hands. And again, this all takes practice. It takes some thinking, okay, how's the saber going to move this way if I move? How's it going to move back if I move that way? That kind of thing. This is something you just have to be conscious of. You have to kind of almost map out in a way. Like if I'm spinning, if I take a step with this leg through, that leg back, this leg through, that leg back. Kind of get an idea of how the saber moves in relation to your body, okay? So that's my thoughts on that video. Again, if anybody has any questions, obviously let me know. I will say it does get a little bit more complicated with two sabers because you have two sabers working independently of each other. So when you're moving, it can get a little bit more difficult getting tangled up, whacking things together. So that's just something you have to be conscious of there. But for single saber, for staff, it's one solid thing. It's not two separate things you're dealing with. So that's my recommendations. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.